Hi guys, let's get right into it. This is a whole can of worms. So today I want to talk to you about capitalism and socialism, one of the biggest contenders of most of the wars fought in the 20th century. So if you notice in the internet, if you criticize, it's a very polarizing situation right now. If you criticize socialism, you would get bombarded by the socialists, like surprise, surprise, like how these zealous, defenders of the proletariat will do anything to, protect their idea, one YouTuber at a time. Regardless, it's I want to venture into exploring why is socialism as an idea still so persistent, and is there any surprise it would be so persistent? Like, should I? Is that question should even be asked? So let me tell you something. Across the board, right? What capitalism has done in the 20th century, it's something that you would consider as positive because, as a whole, having freer trade, having a globalized world where people specialize in whatever they're doing, it usually brings about a better outcome and to all the parties involved. The whole point of capitalism was win-win, and that's how trading works. So some many people, when talking about capitalism, talk about Adam Smith as the person who first observed this happening and wrote a book about it. But keep in mind that Adam Smith, before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wrote a book called The Moral Sentiments. In the Moral Sentiments, he explores like where does morality really come from in human beings. This was after the two books which talks about statecraft in the Europeans, sector. I don't know sector like hemisphere. I guess I don't know. Just the European zone was Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and uh, Rousseau's Rousseau had a book about human nature. So according to Rousseau, a man like human beings are naturally very nice to each other. Like according to him, like before society came into being, human beings had a life which was something like that of a paradise. And in the other side, we have Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, which is based on like that human beings are by nature evil and they are being civilized by society. So you have like the Leviathan to him is something which is like a sovereign, like a king. So or like a government which has absolute power in the sense power over protecting its citizens. Like he did not mean it like a totalitarian sense, but it's a very complex book, and there's the criticism like it is still to this day like analyzed and reanalyzed, and new interpretations come through. Why would I like talk come from there is because there is enough evidence to suggest that because of capitalism, like people have an incentive to be nicer to each other, so they are more kinder to each other, and that was the whole point of Adam Smith's next book he wrote after Moral Sentiments, which was The Wealth of Nations. He's a Scottish economist, like not even an economist, more of a philosopher, and he spent enough time in many of the workshops and trading centers in Scotland to figure out like what's going on here. Like there's something new is emerging out of things getting industrialized. So all of this takes like a huge tipping. I mean, like things go head to head in the 20th century when Hitler had his Socialism. It went far into the right. Like Hitler was really scared of the communists, and like it's so strange that the 1939 to 1945, like these were the like when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Hitler intended to wipe out all the communists, and the Allies back then, the US and the UK, they were suspicious of the Soviet Union. But then to take Hitler down, they had to ally themselves with the Soviet Union. And ever since then, right, like the Cold War is almost as if it's still going on with what the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the invasion of Afghanistan by Soviet Union, and so on and so forth. But in the present day, there is a very interesting article which explores the modern contemporary world by humanprogress.org. Humanprogress.org is a fantastic resource resource for you for all the research that they have done. See, I mixed up research and resource, but yeah. So here there's an article written by Alexander C.R. Hammond called "Anti-Capitalism: Trendy but Wrong." So you can find the link in the description below, and there's also another link to a book about socialism, and it explores an idea in a new way. So uh, let's just explore what this article has to say, because it's fascinating. So you see that thousands of anti-capitalist protesters, they wear that V for Vendetta, that Guy Fawkes mask with the mustache and stuff, which incidentally made in China. They come for anti-establishment demonstrations, and this has happened in France. This has happened in like uh, it's happening almost all around the world. And like even in the newspapers, you see this stuff like capitalism is in crisis, capitalism is falling, capitalism is dead. However, whatever you keep saying about capitalism, like regardless of how trendy socialism seems to be, uh, it still seems that with capitalism, our life standards of living are getting better. Like the poverty, like the trend that is saying that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. It's actually not as accurate, because it seems that the more the capitalism puts its roots out there, the poverty line is people are coming out of their poverty line, and the there's an institute called the Fraser Institute. It's a Canadian think tank which publishes economic freedom of the world. So it went out to find out which countries have the freest economies, like the most capitalist economies, all right? And their point was, we'll get to the point, but how their methodology was, they ranked the level of freedom of 162 economies using 43 indices across major policy areas like size of government, legal systems, property rights, sound money, freedom to trade internationally, and regulation. So the idea behind this report is that if you find out which countries have the most capitalist economies, you can then use this information to see if capitalist countries have better outcomes. Like, is capitalism as a system working for the citizens when compared to the more socialist or least socialist? Because the socialist idea or utopia has not been achieved yet. So to analyze the correlation between economic freedom and human well-being, the EFW splits the 162 economies into quartiles based on their level of economic freedom, like quadrants, I suppose. And the results are staggering. The average income in the most capitalist quartile of countries is an astonishing 6 times higher in real terms than the average income in the least capitalist economies. For the poorest in the society, the gap widens even more. The bottom 10% of income earners in the most capitalist countries make on average 7 times more than the poorest 10% in the least free economies. Similarly, more than 27% of people in the most socialist economies live in extreme poverty, as defined by the World Bank as an income of less than $1.9 a day, whereas just 1.8% of people in freest economies live in extreme poverty, a figure that is still too high. The optimal number is zero, but vastly better than the level that persists in the least free countries. Economic measures aside, people living in the most capitalist countries also live on average 14 years longer, have an infant mortality rate 6 times lower, enjoy greater political and civil liberties, gender equality to the extent you can measure such things, greater happiness too, when compared to the least capitalist economies. Okay, take Hong Kong, for example, which is the world's freest economy, according to EW report. Surprising, right? In 1941, journalist and writer Martha Gellhorn visited the city-state with her husband. Ernest Hemingway and Martha Gellhorn. Like Ernest Hemingway is a famous writer. The real Hong Kong was the most cruel poverty, worse than I had seen before. Worse still because of an air of eternity. Life had always been like this, always would be. But just a few years after Gellhorn's visit, the surrender of the Japanese in 1945 meant that the British rule returned to the island, and with it came a largely laissez-faire approach to the city's economy. Laissez-faire is like a French term to mean like, let things go as they let it go as it goes on, like minimum interference, like things are just let go. So whenever you talk about capitalist economies, you will hear this term a lot, laissez-faire. So in 1950, the average citizen in Hong Kong earned 36% of what the average citizen in the United Kingdom earned. But as Hong Kong embraced economic freedom, according to EFW, Hong Kong has the most capitalist economy every year, bar one since 1970. It became substantially richer. Today, Hong Kong's GDP per capita is a whopping 68% higher than UK's. As Marianne Dupy, editor of humanprogress.org, notes, the poverty that Gellhorn bemoaned is gone thanks to economic freedom. So this is one of the major things that even Bjorn Lomborg, the Swedish environmentalist, he has he's a part of this Copenhagen consensus, and he also recommends the best way to protect people from the oncoming climate change is freer trade, diametrically opposite to what most of the environmentalists are talking about. So, decrying the ills of capitalism on a placard or in a newspaper headline is a trend with little sign of going away anytime soon. But when we see such unsubstantiated claims, we could remember that data simply doesn't support the anti-capitalists. I hope this informs you enough to do your own research. And any of the socialists out there, please don't like send me to the gulag or whatever by sending me like trolling or trolling me. So I hope you don't do that. So I'm just the messenger. I'll see you soon, and bye bye.